Welcome to IETV. My name is Rudy Mazzetta. I'm a reporter with Investment Executive, and I'm here with Terry Ritchie, cross-border tax specialist. Hi, Terry.
Hi.
Recently, the U.S. and Canada agreed to an entry-exit initiative that will see both governments collecting information on each other's citizens. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can. So this is specifically related to the day count. So,
Right.
so now both countries
Mm-hmm.
will be providing information directly to each other so that they'll be aware of the number of days the Canadians are in the U.S. So it used to be that we knew when we went in, but we effectively didn't know when we left. And so now that information is readily available as of June 30th. So to the extent that Snowbirds have not been fully honorable about counting their days, those days are now counted for them. In fact, there's a website that Canadians can access. It's a U.S. website. It's www.i94.cpb.dhs.gov. You can go there. You provide your name, first name, last name, passport number, nationality, and then your information will come up in terms of what's in the system around the days that you've physically been in the U.S.
And why are the number of days that a Canadian snowbird spends in the U.S. important? How does that affect them?
Well, it affects them in a number of ways. I think first and foremost, this day count is really for immigration purposes. Homeland Security in the U.S. needs to be aware of how long folks are spending in the U.S. As most of our viewers are aware, Canadians cannot be in the U.S. for longer than 182 days in the U.S. for immigration purposes. Beyond that, they could be barred from reentry for a period of 3 years initially. If they're in the U.S. for longer than 365 days and get caught, it can be a 10-year ban. So immigration, they need to be aware of what's going on in terms of days. But most of our viewers and advisors would also want to be aware of days because the U.S. has what's called a substantial presence test, which is the calculation of the number of days for income tax purposes. And so the substantial presence test is a requirement that Canadians would have to go through. We would count the number of days in the current year, take 1/3 of the days in the preceding year, and add 1/6 the days in the year before that. And if the sum of that calculation is more than 183 days, then they would meet the substantial presence test and be deemed a U.S. tax resident. And as most of our viewers are aware, Canadians do have an out from being taxed on their worldwide income as a U.S. resident through the filing of a form called the 8840 form, the Closer Connection Exception Statement. And to the extent that that's timely filed, typically June 15th of the year after they meet this test, if they fill that form out, submit it, then they will satisfy those obligations.
Now, from what I understand, there's still one other option to apply to the tax treaty between Canada and the U.S.?
There is, but to the extent that you go ahead and use the treaties to tie break as a closer connection back to Canada without filing the 8840, then you've got to be in the U.S. for longer than 183 days in the calendar year. If you do that, if you file a 1040 or a non-resident return, and then the 8833 form, the treaty form, you've acknowledged basically that you are an illegal alien. You have broke those immigration rules, and that wouldn't be a good thing.
So it's the less than ideal option.
It certainly is. I mean, for most Canadians, typically the filing of the 8840 is going to satisfy those obligations. Again, many people are hopeful that the retirement visa, the so-called retirement visa, would be passed. I'm not a fan of that visa, but my sense is that, again, this is to track the days in the U.S. for immigration purposes. Of course, it's going to mean that Canadians are not going to be able to fudge those days because those days are now going to be a permanent record within their systems.
Right. Thank you, Terry. And thank you for joining us on IETV.